evening, everyone. I am Architect Ketki Karmarkar on behalf of GRIHA Council. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you for this session, Market on Legal Perspectives. Sustainable development or sustainability can be implemented only if financial market, legal and political mechanisms allow it to do so. United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are leading the discussion within stakeholders and promoting to make necessary modification in laws, practices and policies. Many countries are taking steps towards meeting goals, at the same time facing some challenges to implement the same. We have gathered here to discuss the scenario in the market, legal and policy mechanisms that promote sustainability. With that note, I would like to request our esteemed speakers and chair of the session to please come on dais. Dr. Maria Balatbat, Senior Lecturer, Joint Director, UNSW Business School, Center for Energy and Environmental Markets, University of New South Wales. Mr. Christopher McElwain, Faculty of Law, UNSW Business School, University of New South Wales. Please have a round of applause for everybody. Ms. Xinyi, Researcher, UNSW Business School, University of New South Wales. Ms. Manju Menon, Program Director, Environment Justice, Namati. Mr. Sunil Agarwal, Associate Dean and Director, School of Real Estate, Managing Director, Black Olive Ventures Private Limited. A warm welcome to all of you. Now I would like to introduce our esteemed chair for the session, Dr. Maria, Senior Lecturer, Joint Director, UNSW Business School. Can I have screen this presentation showcased? Dr. Maria has built an international rapport with academic and industry practitioners for conducting high quality and innovative research in integration of environmental, social and governance dimensions in investment decisions making, greenhouse gas accounting and assessment of sustainability rating tools in built environment sector. She is a recipient of several Australian Research Council grants examining the capital market implications of integrated reporting and use of environmental and social indicators to develop methodology for incentivization decision. So let's welcome Madam. Over to you.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction, and thank you very much for coming to this very last session of the day. We will try to be as quick as we could. I'd like to start the session by, I guess, giving take on my experience and my research as well in terms of market and legal perspectives. I am delighted and privileged to be here this afternoon to chair and moderate this session on market and legal perspectives. I am told that this is the first time that this thematic theme is introduced in the GRIHA Summit, and we are privileged, to be in this inaugural thematic track at the GRIHA Summit. My name is Maria Balatbat, and I'm a senior lecturer at the School of Accounting in the School of Business at the University of New South Wales in Sydney. I also act as a joint director for the Center for Energy and Environmental Markets. I've been asked to talk about market and legal perspectives in the built environment industry, particularly the trends in the financial market and legal and policy mechanisms that promote sustainability. Achieving a more sustainable society requires a realignment of the built and natural environment. The built environment consumes a lot of energy resource and generates a lot of waste. Solution is on the design and construction of a built asset and supported by management tools and regulatory frameworks that address the sustainable development issues. My talk will start with a background on climate change issues, followed by business initiatives, focusing on the most recent and the bold initiative embarked on by businesses which is the creation of the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. Then close my talk by introducing my research in the built environment sector. So we'll just have a little bit of climate change 101. So we know that it is happening, and I'm pretty sure I won't have any problems convincing the audience here. And we are causing it. So we already observe a 1 degree change since 1880, an increase in global average temperature. But of course, we're dreading the 2 degree change, which we will experience extreme weather events and polar ice cap melting, and this is irreversible. But of course, there is the more dreadful 4 degree centigrade, wherein we would experience global water shortages and major increases in ocean acidity. And the implications will be just catastrophic. So many governments have come together to reduce global carbon emissions to keep temperatures increases below 2 degrees as a result of the Paris Agreement. And to contain this, we are given a budget, 1,100 gigatons of carbon dioxide, and that is our global carbon budget to be able to contain global warming by 2050. And just to demonstrate the scale of this, Australia's carbon budget is 10.1, which is a very small proportion. I'm pretty sure India's is much more, but I tried to look at the level of the budget, but the numbers were very different depending on which particular research you're looking at. So I just thought I'd show Australia, but I think India's would be more 4 times or 7 times this carbon budget. So the problem that we face, though, is that Australia emits 4 times the global average carbon emissions per capita. And at this rate, Australia will exhaust its 2050 carbon budget by 2030. So there needs to be a drastic shift in our economy and the way we live to stay within its carbon budget. And over the couple of days here in the GRIHA Summit, I thought I got the impression that everybody is in agreement that governments can't do this alone. Society has to contribute, organizations has to contribute. So I thought I'd introduce to you my take on it, with the involvement of the financial sector. So the initiatives from businesses, and this has been going on for the last 30 years, so there is a plethora of standards and regulations and frameworks that are available. So if, say, an organization would want to reduce its carbon emissions, for instance, there won't be any shortages of references that you could, look into. An example would be the greenhouse gas protocol, which has been, updated in order for it to be much more useful to any firm of different sizes. The most popular, of course, is the Global Reporting Initiative, wherein there is a framework for reporting economic, environmental, and social implications or impacts of an organization. There is also the family of ISO standards that ranges from social and environmental guidance. And more recently, there is a move to introduce integrated reporting framework, which is an alternative reporting for business organizations, and the sustainability accounting standards in the US, which is gaining popularity. But what I'd like to discuss, since I only have 10 to 15 minutes today, is 2 things: Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures and the Sustainable Development Goals, which is quite related to the research that we did. So what is the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures? This all started when Mark Carney, the governor of the Bank of England, sort of said that there is a tragedy of horizons in the investment community, because investors seem to focus on short-term gains rather than focusing on long-term, value for an organization. So organizations are just continuing to catch on earnings, for the short term, for quarterly earnings, for instance. So organizations don't have time to evaluate their business strategy to create more long-term value creation for an entity. So, he said that by the time climate change becomes a defining issue for financial stability, it will likely be too late, to do anything about it. So hence, that sort of woke up the financial community in the UK, and that spread in the EU. And they decided that to slow or reverse the current rate of global warming, we'll need a substantial shift in regulatory policy, consumer and company behavior, all of which could threaten traditional business models. So as a result of this, a working group has been set up, and they are called the task force. And they are tasked with creating a set of comparable and consistent disclosures that companies can use to demonstrate climate change resilience to their capital providers. I put capital providers in bold there because we need investment in renewable energy. We need investment, to transition us to the low carbon economy. And guess what? Most governments don't have that amount of funding. So hence we need, the institutional investors and the capital providers to get involved. So, and in Australia, climate change is moving to the center stage of directors' duties. For instance, the Business Council commissioned a legal opinion on the extent to which Australian corporate law permits, and indeed requires, company directors to take climate change into account when making decisions about company strategy, performance, and risk disclosure. As a result of this legal opinion, Noel Hutley, Senior Counsel in 2016, have the opinion that the duty of care and diligence also extends to a director having to make a conscious decision in response to the risk of climate change. Soon after, the chairman of the Australian Prudential Regulatory Agency have made an announcement that the boards must consider transaction risks, including climate change, in their business decision making. And I think this is very important for Australia because APRA actually regulates, the financial community. So hence, it sends the message to investors, to superannuation funds, that they need to consider climate change or climate risks, when they make their investment decisions. And then as a result, the Australian Securities Exchange has a proposal to update their Code of Corporate Governance to include a clause that a listed entity must have regard to the views and interests of a broader range of stakeholders. So hence, the legal system is being influential as well in the take on the disclosure of climate-related financial disclosures. And the idea here is that investors are asking for more information on climate change risks in order that they could provide a more accurate valuation of their investment portfolio. So what does the TCFD entail? So I'm just going to give you the core elements. So what the TCFD has recommended is that there should be a disclosure on governance as to the climate-related risks and opportunities, the strategy that they have in assessing these risks, and the opportunities that they have identified as a result of this risk evaluation. And then processes used by organizations to identify the assets and manage climate-related risks, and then indicate metrics and targets. At present, we see metrics and targets being disclosed in sustainability reports, but we don't know the process, that was, I guess, that they followed in order to assess these metrics. So there are quite a number of Indian supporters, for the TCFD. Because typically this will be for the UK, the European firms, some in Australia. But as you could see there are large organizations in India that are supporting this climate-related financial disclosures. So as an example of a risk management, so risk can be transition risk or it could be physical risk. But if you look at physical risk, say an increase in extreme weather, it may impact property assets, employee health, and operations. It could also be a risk to the business model of an organization threat to the business operations through unavailable resources, increased or unpredictable costs, and business closure. There is also the risk to reputation on how environmental matters are addressed can affect core intangible assets of an organization. And in terms of legal and regulatory risks, there are potential regulatory risks associated with climate change within statutory law, common law, and fiduciary law. So it's not all bad news, because when you do a risk assessment, typically you would identify perhaps new product opportunities, new revenue streams, and there will be cost savings and efficiencies via innovation. So a carefully linked sort of evaluation of the risk could perhaps create value for an entity. And this is a chart from the TCFD as well. As you can see, the risks and opportunity are feed into the strategic planning, and then the financial impact is expected to be disclosed in terms of income statement, cash flow, and balance sheet effects. I know this is a hard ask for organizations, and in fact, we haven't seen anyone who has explicitly said what's going to be the implication in income, cash flow, and balance sheet. I am an accountant by profession, and the accounting profession is very strict on standards on what is recognized on the balance sheet and the income statement. So there is an issue here as to how it is going to be monetized, the certainty of the event, because typically this extreme weather event, for instance, we don't know when it's going to occur, and the magnitude of its implications. So those are certain things that. But the TCFD said that if you use climate change scenario, and then there will be a more, I guess, robust determination, what the implications might be. So in the few minutes that I have, so the Sustainable Development Goals is another way to look at it. So as we know, there is now 17 Sustainable Development Goals, an update to a lesser in the Millennium Development Goals. But I guess what I want to highlight here is that a lot of these goals are interconnected, as can be seen in this graph that was prepared by Jessica Price. Although the Stockholm Resilience Center has actually presented it as the environment underpinning the society, and then which underpins the economy. And at the apex of this analysis is partnerships, which is what we're doing here in the GRIHA Summit. How much time do I have? So this is the research that I did for the CRC Low Carbon Living, and if you attended Deo Prasad's presentation, so this is one of the SP006 projects. And I'll do a shortcut. So it's a built environment impact framework guideline. We expect any player within the built environment sector to be able to use this framework. And as you could see on the right-hand side of it is very robust, because we did an 18-month survey, of what is materially significant, to the players of the sector. And then we recommended that there are 6 pillars, responding to climate change, managing resources sustainably, driving fair work and prosperity, promoting well-being, and so on and so forth. And we have some suggestions on how the different parties could actually look into these different pillars individually in that framework. So, and the idea is for I guess any player not to just look at the material financial implications of the project, but look at environmental and social, impact, of a development. Okay. So I think that's gonna sort of kickstart, the discussion that we have. We have 4 speakers after me, and then we would start the conversation from there.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for setting the tone for this session. I would like to introduce our next speaker for this session, Ms. Xinyi Geng. She is currently a PhD candidate in the School of Economics, University of New South Wales, Australia. Her main research is in areas of environmental economics, international trade, and international economics. Her current research focuses on promoting economic theory of policies towards forming effective international environmental agreements in global climatic change mitigation. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. So my name is Xinyi Geng. I'm a PhD candidate in University of New South Wales Business School. Today, I would like to share my research about international cooperation on climate change with you guys. I attended a few sessions yesterday and this morning, and I'm so happy to say that a lot of fantastic works on national level, industry level, or even product level have been done towards a sustainable future. However, climate change is not an issue that an individual country can solve. It's a global issue which requires international cooperation. So today, I would like to take the audience to say the challenges of tackling climate change from a broader perspective and from an economics perspective. So, since this is not the first session of the summit, I'm pretty sure that you guys are already fully aware of how severe the climate change problem is, how much actions are needed. So I'm just going to skip this part. So climate change is a global issue. All countries will be affected, but the impact of climate change is not evenly distributed. So the most vulnerable, the poorest, and the poorest countries and populations suffer the earliest and the most. So the figure on the left shows the overall direct risks of climate change to each country. So the darker, the worse. So as we can say, most of the Asian and African developing countries really suffers the most from climate change. So in particular, China suffers the most, while India is closely following. So what's worse, those developing countries, we are less capable of responding to climate change. So let's take a look at the situation for India in particular. So according to Dr. Ricky's research on nature climate change in 2018, so the social carbon cost of India is the highest among all the countries in the world. So the World Bank Group also estimates that the climate change could cost India 2.8% of GDP and depress the living standards of nearly half of the country's population by 2050. So clearly, climate change is really a big challenge for all the developing countries ahead. But at the same time, it is also a potential opportunity. So dealing with climate change actually brings a lot of co-benefits for developing countries. For example, stimulate innovation in technology, generating employment, etc. So from all the discussions above, developing countries really suffers from climate change, and we need international cooperation. We have a high incentive to participate in international climate cooperation. So I'm so happy to see that the emerging economies such as China and India, so nowadays are taking leading roles in international cooperation negotiation. So you should really be proud of yourself. Good job. So now let's take a look at the benefit and cost of climate change from the global level. So according to STIR Review 2006, so the damage of climate change will be equivalent to 5% to 20% of the global GDP per year now and forever if we don't act. But the cost can be limited to 1% of global GDP per year. So it is such a simple math problem, right? So I'm pretty sure that a first-year primary school student can solve it. But why does this simple math not work? So as I have emphasized, climate change is a global issue in terms of its cause and consequences. So the science tells us emissions have same effect no matter where they arise. And also no one can be excluded from enjoying the benefit of the achievements, abatement achievements, no matter this person or this country contributes to the abatement or not. So to put it in economics context, so a better global environment is a pure public good, so which creates strong free riding incentives. So here I prepare a small game for the audience who don't have economic background. So suppose we have two players, the United States and also the other one is China. So each of the two players have two strategies, either to abate or to pollute. So the pair numbers in each cell represents the net benefit from the combined actions. So for example, if China is going to abate, then the United States can either abate to get 10 units of net benefit or to pollute to get 15 units of net benefit. So now, let me give throw the question to the audience. If you were the president of the United States, which choice are you going to choose? Are you going to abate or pollute? So any answers? Come on, you are the president of the United States. That's a big decision.
You never tried the current president.
Of course, pollute, because pollute generates a higher welfare. 15 is larger than 10, right? So if China is going to pollute, so US can either going to pollute to get a 1 or to abate to get a 0. So it seems that a polluter is also a better choice for US. So therefore, no matter what actions China is going to take, pollute is always a dominant strategy for the United States. And China thinks exactly in the same way. So we will end up with pollute, and each of the country only get 1 unit of net benefit. So you might already notice that if they can cooperate with each other, each of them can get 10 net benefits. But cooperation is a better choice for the collective welfare, but it's not a better choice to maximize the individual welfare. So that's why we are in a global president's dilemma. Currently, we are in such a dilemma. So you might think, if cooperation is a better choice for each of the parties, can we just force them to cooperate? The answer is no. There's no supranational authority that can force countries to cooperate. So which means that it must be in each country's own interest to be part of this climate cooperation. And there's also other issues about taking actions to tackle climate change. For example, the competitiveness laws from international trade. So countries who take actions are kind of worried they might lose a comparative advantage, at least at the margin, compared to the other countries who do not cooperate. So in the carbon-intensive industries. So according to economic, sorry, that's my timer. So according to economic models, so a 1% point change in cost raises the import penetration by 0.53% point. So economics studies about international climate cooperation really need to capture all those things. So here I built an economic theoretical model which captures economic factor, international market factor, and also the climate cost factor. So I'm not going to details about the model because I don't want to bore the audience. So let's just go directly to the results I get. So I found that there's a small collision paradox in international climate cooperation. So when the environmental damage level is low, so countries actually want to fully cooperate. But the welfare gain from this cooperation is not very high. So as the environmental damage level increases, the welfare gain from full cooperation also increases. But the free riding incentives also becomes stronger. There's always some country who choose not to participate and to free ride. So the current progress of international cooperation is consistent with the literature. So actually we started working on international cooperation back to 1992, but we don't make much progress, to be honest. Yeah. Between 1992 to 2007, so the world emission did not decrease, but increased by 38%. So this is really frustrating. Then I'm asking the question, what can we do? How to design efficient and effective global environmental agreement to overcome these free riding problems? So as I have said before, trade in a sense amplifies the free riding incentives, but trade is also a potential solution to the climate cooperation. So economists have proposed a climate club in which countries that don't participate in international climate cooperation will be excluded from trade privileges. So my theoretical model shows that this kind of linkage to trade policy sustains a wider cooperation when the environmental damage level is moderate. So if the problem becomes really severe, so trade linkage can help as well. So Nordhaus, this year's Nobel Prize laureate, so estimate the welfare gain and the loss from this kind of climate club. So he finds that a relatively low tariff, around 2%, is sufficient to sustain full participation when the abatement responsibility is low. So more importantly, countries with high damages, such as India, will gain from all policy regimes. Isn't it good? But there are also challenges in introducing trade linkage in practice. So my theoretical model shows that countries who used to be free riders are worse off with this climate club. So they will be always against this climate club. So the policymakers really need to think creative. So now, under the current WTO rules, it is not quite clear whether the introduction of this kind of trade linkage can be approved without the consensus approval of all the existing members. So I will end up my talk with 2 sentences. Firstly, think creative. The second one, don't wait until it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you, Xinyi. Now we move upon our next speaker, Mr. Sunil Agarwal, Associate Dean Director, School of Real Estate and Managing Director. He has experience of 23 years in real estate sector and founder and Managing Director of Black Olive Ventures Private Limited. It's a real estate valuation and advisory company. He has a strong track record of turnaround management and startups. Many of his initiatives are now profitable business or business verticals. With that note, may I request Mr. Sunil to put light on this theme further.
Thank you. First of all, I left being an academician this May this year because I failed to look at the complicated model that you saw. So I think just to keep life very simple, I just want to make this more interactive because I think the issue is well understood. It is concerning to everybody, and often the industry is the bad boy. The industry is blamed for every single law that's broken in any part of the globe. But let me first ask you, and anybody in the audience, please feel free to participate. What is it that matters to business the most? Who's the darling, who's the hero for a business investor or a business entrepreneur in an organization, in any organization. The hero, the role which is the most, the managing director would be very unhappy to say bad things to that person. Any entrepreneur, any business owner would be very unhappy. He'll be very quiet with those set of people in the organization. Investors. I'm talking investors, entrepreneurs. Who are they afraid of?
People who are making profit.
Who are the people who make profit? Is the sales boy on the road? Is that sales boy? So anybody who can sell my product, I'm afraid of that guy. I've seen many organizations, CEOs getting afraid when a smart sales person walks into the room and says, I want this to happen this way, and the whole strategy just changes because they have the voice to the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer who can get money. So businesses are affected by only one thing. That is, either mera maal bech do, any business, global or Indian, it's a lala business. At the end of the day, lala ko do hi log pyare hote hain. One who can sell the product and the other who can get money for the business, right? Often what happens is we don't target in any of such initiatives those two people. We target everybody else, the big researcher, sustainability officer. Are you talking to that sales boy? Are you talking that if you do this, your product becomes more sellable? If you do that as an industry, as an initiative, I think it is going to cut more ice. Two, is this initiative going to make you money? Are you going to explain this in the long term, short term? But you must speak a financial language for the industry to understand. Because that's the only language they understand. They're mandated to do so, right? I've been on boards of many investment companies. I sit on boards of a lot of investment committees. Bottom line, I haven't seen an investment being shot down because that guy did not follow a sustainability model. On the contrary, investors are very happy to listen to certain certifications. This is LEED Platinum, I'll invest. My green bonds are available for you. Now, the question here to be asked is, there is a green bond that the investor is investing. Is he ready to bite a small 0.5% haircut? The answer is no. Green bonds don't come at a coupon which is cheaper than the other coupon. So they want you to follow everything but not pay the price themselves. That's the dichotomy. So I've spoken to a lot of investors, a lot of industry people. I think the true dialogue will start only when we will start engaging these salespeople. We will start engaging the CFOs to make them understand that initiatives, whatever they are going to make an impact on their bottom line. And there are many segments to the market. When you look at built environment sector, the sector that I'm most familiar with, those are having multiple segments. The high income groups, the luxury groups, the mid income groups, the lower groups. And I think if you look at the spectrum of people who kind of are there in these groups, each one's need is very different. So if an asset is built, a building is built for a corporate for its own use, they understand sustainability because at the end of the day, they do not want to pay the recurring maintenance charges which happen with a non-sustainable building. So they understand, they want to take the initiative, they will be the leaders. A hotel company will be a leader because hotels consume a lot of energy, they consume a lot of resources. If you go to them, they will adopt it first. What I've seen is that we want to go to the last denominator and we want to say we use this building material for the EWS housing, or we want to go to the government boards where the need for this is absolutely at the lower end. So I think you should start targeting, we should all start targeting groups which can adopt this first, and then they become the models, and then you push it down through the regulation. See, nothing gets done voluntarily. So there has to be a bit of regulation, and there has to be a bit of targeting people who are the right customers. If you are targeting customers which are not your customers, then all this will never be adopted as soon as it should be. Couple of other things that I was just I've observed globally of developments that have adhered to certain principles and others would not. It's very painful to do something which is in the long run. As Maria said that investors look at short term and they don't look at long term. Some good investors do things in the long term, but most of us do things in the short term. And we don't make, or the society that sits in this room doesn't make what the world is. If elections yesterday were any indication, of what happened. I've seen in this country there were only 4 people who made the difference. Rajiv Gandhi, who set the tone for a different thought process. Narasimha Rao, who was the guru for economic liberalization. Then there was Vajpayee, who did something very differently. He didn't interfere in what was going on. And then there is Modi. And you see each one of them, the three prime ministers in this country who actually made the significant difference lost the general election just after they completed the term. Rajiv Gandhi lost to VP Singh. Then you had Narasimha Rao, who lost to a series of other set of people. Vajpayee lost to Manmohan Singh. So it's very painful. Why only investors? It's very painful to take a hard pill. You know, today people can criticize demonetization, they can criticize GST, they can criticize many things. All things are not right. But similar is the dilemma of an investor. Are you looking in short term or long term? And often what happens is there are different kinds of money available in this world. And I want to tell this audience that there is patient money and there is hard money. And everybody makes an arbitrage. So at the very top are the pension funds who get money for 25 years. So I have money for 25 years, I have the patience. Then what do I do with that money? I give it to an investor who says that I will make you more money than what your risk is. I'll take a little more risk, give me the money. I will make 10%, I'll give you 7, I'll keep the 3. This guy who gets money at 10% then goes and gives it to a business who gives it at, who borrows money at 14%, and this guy makes 4. This is how the world is, this is how the finance works. Now in that pecking order, whom would you target for your goals? You would target the pension funds. At the same time, make pension funds also realize that if they really want to make an impact, that this 7 or 7.5 or whatever returns they're giving, they must monitor what's happening with their money. I've seen a lot of money which is being given for green, and it has just been used on a certification which is not good. There are many buildings that I see across the globe which are built to LEED Platinum or any kind of certification, and then what happens in the usage, they all deteriorate. There is this whole apathy towards using water, using resources. LEED Platinum buildings, I've seen people not maintaining them properly and they're wasting more water, electricity, etc. than the other buildings which will not be LEED Platinum. So it's not only one-time certification, one should insist on a continuous certification. And that is something which is very, very easy, because we must not only have one-time certification programs, we must have a certification program which goes on every year. There must be committees. And by the way, a lot of corporate real estate professionals today have a lot of sustainability targets, and they're very happy if you make them aware. The other thing that I don't see is that we are not targeting these sustainability professionals. We think the sustainability officer and organization is what we need to target. But I'm very happy that GRIHA signed an MOU with GSCS, which is Global Association for Corporate Services, on the curtain raiser night. And I think they are your biggest customers who are going to really make a real impact on what the sustainability is. Just to share a small incident that happened with me in HSBC, I used to be the head for real estate. We were mandated to do so many things which were sustainable. One of the things was that we were using these paper cups. So we said it's a tremendous waste to use paper cups for consuming water. So next day we gave somebody designed, and we said we are going to give these HSBC mugs which are going to be on everybody's table, and everybody is going to go and fill his mug and wash his mug, and that's more sustainable. And we then measured, and we realized that we were wasting more water, and so our score actually went down from So when you do these sustainability measures, as rightly which is pointed out, do it from a holistic perspective. Don't be short-sighted. One day paper is bad, so I've discarded paper. The other day. So please evaluate the impact of every single decision that is being taken, and then do it in a larger game. I mean, I see people often very fascinated with their own little research, and when you put that research into work, then it destroys a whole lot of other things up. So I think there's this approach which is required. Last thing before I kind of wind up is that nobody likes rollbacks. As an industry, we don't like rollbacks. So I'll give you one example. All of you are aware of this NGT issue that happened in Noida. Are the audience aware? Because of this NGT, what happened was in Noida, a lot of buildings which are under construction were put to, there was no work happening. Now imagine as an industry, I have put in money, I'm giving employment to thousands of people who are working at the site. There is a serious amount of housing shortage in this country which is being addressed through that project. And I'm buying land from whom? I bought land from Noida Authority. It's the Noida Authority which a developer goes to, pays full value of the land, goes to Noida Authority or any authority, gets the permissions, and now my project is under construction. And one fine day somebody gets up in the audience and says, sorry, you're doing anything which is wrong. How am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? I've already burnt my money, I'm doing the right cause, I'm doing everything as per the books, and still I'm being penalized. That is something which is extremely unhealthy. So I mean, we've seen NGT example, and we've never seen NGT getting into Delhi, where equal amount of activity is happening. Batla House is a place where a lot of activities are happening. Udhar koi farak nahi padta, only Noida is blamed for. So this selective bias, rollbacks, which sometimes happen, they cast a very, very negative impression in the minds of the industry. Today, if I have to invest in a situation like this, I'll say I'll not invest. Because who wants to face the investors committee and be a public spectacle in front of other investors? So that is something which is extremely, extremely disturbing. And I was one of the people who took a lot of city managers to a lot of public projects which were done, keeping the transportation corridors in mind. So TOD projects across the globe, we did a tour with a lot of smart city managers. And we happened to visit the King's Cross development in London. When we met Rob Evans, who was the developer, he said, we've had 235 revisions of our master plan. 235 revisions before he could actually get to the project. And then subsequently, every single public hearing was done, it was closed. After 235 revisions, nobody now says this project is bad, good, ugly, damaging, non-damaging, and the guy is happy. No public agency charged him more than 1% of the total bid amount till then. So this 235 revisions happened over a period of, I think, 4 to 5 years. But you didn't ask the developer to pay more than 1% of what he was buying the land for. And the government was a partner in the process of getting the approvals, getting the public hearings done. And when everything was put to press, all hearings were done, then only he started to do the project. That is when, so we can have an approach where we can go to the industry, have a public hearing, let the consultations happen. But when the money is gone in, you can't go and put the project to stop. Let all of us debate. It's not only that single project or a developer or people who are interested. It's a much larger question. City has to benefit. There is a benefit that the city wants. There is a benefit that environmentalists would want, all the concerns. Everybody, but let that process begin not after the project has been halfway through. And once, at least that's my experience, that if you have a proper process to development, public hearings, etc., things would happen. Things would happen the right way. There are a lot of industry professionals who understand the value of money. They understand the fact that if I make sustainable habitat, it is going to be more sellable, at least to a segment of people. Everybody understands clean air. There's nobody who doesn't understand. So there's a complete willingness. However, I see a lot of debate, unwanted debate, between people who are pro-environmentalist lobby versus developers. And I think that debate has to move to a much more healthy platform. It can't be a blame game. It can't be a fear of the industry. Why industry is afraid? It is afraid because today if I've invested so many millions of dollars, and after that if somebody comes and says, sorry, you are on the wrong footing, I don't want to be in that situation. So with those words, I'll just close. I think let's start making a more meaningful discussion. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can we have question and answer session, if any?
We might go for the next presentation,
Okay,
because we're running out of time. And we'll just have the Q&A after the 2 other presentations.
So may I introduce Ms. Manju Menon. She is a senior fellow at Center for Policy Research and director of Namati's Environmental Justice Program. Namati is an international NGO dedicated to legal empowerment. Manju researches and writes on environmental law and policy and the regulation of infrastructure development. She collaborates with local community organizations and civil society networks for public advocacy on resource governance reforms. Welcome to you.
much for inviting me to this panel. This is the first time I've ever been part of an event of this nature. I think I'll just pick up from where Sunil left, and I think in the interest of time, that might be the most useful thing to do. My main area of work has been the political economy of environment regulation. So I basically am interested in the relationship between economic sectors and environment regulation, and it's an extremely complex, often it's a very difficult relationship between these two, because just as the economy requires environment regulations to do certain things in the interest of economic goals or targets, environment regulation also impacts these economic goals and desires and aspirations and all of that stuff in very major ways. So it's only recently that I've started looking at, with a few other colleagues, some of them sitting there, I've started looking at the relationship between environment regulation and urban development projects, large-scale urban development projects. And prior to this, we've looked at how environment regulation actually functions in other important economic sectors like energy projects, mining, hydropower, for example. And so in the case of urban development projects, and I want to specifically keep going back to these two examples that are playing out right now in Delhi. And I was actually even going to suggest that if some of you are interested, you should just drive through South Extension, and you'll see the East Kirbainagar redevelopment area, where you'll see these repetitive high-rise blocks that have come up in the last couple of years. And along with that project, I also want to. I think many of you would know about the proposal that the government has to convert these government colonies, basically 7 government colonies across Sarojini Nagar, Netaji Nagar, Nauroji Nagar, and 7 of them into the stated goal is to increase the government housing by double. But what is actually being done is these are large-scale development projects that involve a commercial component, a very large-scale commercial component, because that is the only way these projects can generate finances on their own. So these have very clearly been called self-financed projects. And so these involve multi-level car parks, some degree of housing, as I said, double the number of government housing, private and public office complexes, and these are largely designed as gated communities. Right now, these are open access colonies where you can drive through or you can walk through these areas. These are all going to be gated colonies. Now, the reason why I want to focus on these two projects, I can give you some more details about what these projects are about. East Kirbainagar is on a composite plot of 86 acres. The GPRA, the 7 colonies are spread over 571 acres, but this is along the main Delhi ring road. The car parking in East Kirbainagar is almost 11,000, and out of the 7 colonies which are proposed to come up, in 3 colonies, car parking is allowed up to 1 lakh cars. And this is all in the areas that are being serviced by the Delhi Metro. Yeah? Now, the reason why I'm stating all of this is because these projects, so all of these projects that I've spoken about are the East Kirbainagar was built by NBCC, which is a company directly under the Ministry of Urban Development. The GPRA colonies, out of the 7, 3 are going to be built by NBCC, and the remaining are, we are told, by CPWD. In the case of all these projects, citizens who live in these areas and around these areas got to know of these projects when the trees were being felled in these sites. Yeah, until then, there was actually no information about what these projects are going to be like, and obviously there was a lot of reaction to this, precisely because Delhi is also right now going through the worst phase of its air pollution crisis. I mean, obviously there is no denial, at least among the right-thinking people, that there is a serious crisis that Delhi has to deal with, and we basically have to start doing things differently in terms of urban development in the city if these problems are to be dealt with. Now, both these projects, citizens got to know of these projects only well after a whole set of decisions had been taken about these projects. And the important thing is that since then, both these projects, and I'm talking about just a few months, I mean, I'm talking about since June this year, the citizens' action on both these projects has resulted in multiple cases being filed against these projects. And these are being heard in the Delhi High Court, not in the NGT. And it looks like these are in for the long haul. These projects are in for the long haul. Now, obviously, many of these projects, many of the documents related to these projects were just not available in the public domain at all. The only reason why projects started trickling out for people to read them is because of the legal case. Yeah? We're talking about this in an era where right to information, right to participation are all actually taken as a given in Indian legal systems. Now, the reason why people in Delhi have gotten very concerned about these projects is not only because there are these two cases that are going on, but it's also because there are 30 such government housing colonies which are all expecting a similar treatment. And this is not just the case about Delhi. There are many people in different cities who are really concerned because there are similar government housing colonies in all of these cities, and NBCC is likely to roll out the same schema of development in all these cities. Yeah, and most of these cities are actually facing severe water shortages, air pollution, transport difficulties, all of that stuff. Now, I just want to highlight 3 points that come out of these cases quickly. One is that out of all the work that we've done on environment regulation and looking at how it deals with sectors that are important for the economy, urbanization or urban development projects, now you can call them construction projects, area development projects, whatever it is, they come under different names. These are the ones that have the least amount of technical scrutiny under the environment regulations or environment norms of the country. These are the ones that have the least amount of scrutiny. Basically, all of the other kinds of projects, whether these are mining projects, whatever, and most of these which happen in rural areas, have a much higher level of scrutiny than these projects, and we're talking about urban development projects which are proposed to come up in very densely populated areas. Many of these projects are not greenfield projects. These are areas where there are already a whole bunch of problems, and these are likely to just sort of build over these problems and interact with the already existing problems in very complex ways. So that's the first thing I wanted to sort of flag. And even whatever limited amount of scrutiny there is, even whatever limited amount of scrutiny there exists, it is only within very narrow parameters which are directly related to the building and construction sector. I'll give you an example. The one thing that just does not appear in any of these assessments is the importance of urban ecology. It's a relatively new field. I think people are just gradually sort of waking up to the idea of how urban ecologies, the tree cover, forest areas, urban patches of greenery, whatever, how important are they in determining the environmental factors in these areas. But there is absolutely no importance given to that at all in the way urban projects are assessed. So what happens with these narrow parameters, assessments done on these narrow parameters, is that projects end up having to take up certain kinds of actions. As Sunil said, there are a whole bunch of conditions, or there are a whole bunch of regulations that these projects have to deal with, but they end up being things that are doable. They don't end up being things that are actually necessary. And there is a big difference between these two. Yeah? The second thing that I wanted to talk about is Sunil absolutely directly hit the nail in the head where he said that unless people are taken into account in advance, these things all come back later to haunt the project. So in the case of, again, I want to say it in comparison with respect to all the other sectors, urban development projects are the ones that have absolutely no public scrutiny at all. There are no public consultations, no public hearings whatsoever held for most urban development projects. As a result of which, that's the reason why in the case of the GPRA or in the case of the East Gobain, people got to know about these projects only when tree felling had started or the JCBs had come to destroy the existing houses that stand on these plots. So, and we've noticed with the advocacy that a lot of citizens have done in both these projects, people are willing to ask all the uncomfortable questions, even though, as Sunil pointed, many people have direct stakes in these projects. I mean, many of them are probably going to live in these houses. But the important thing is that architects, urban designers, urban planners were so hesitant to speak because all of their work requires government approvals and they did not want to rub anyone the wrong side. Yeah, so many of the citizens actually got a lot of help from these people, but without their names being mentioned at all, or without their opinion pieces appearing in newspapers or any such thing. This is the reason why having an interface, having a vibrant interface with citizens is extremely important, because citizens ask the right questions, and I don't think the sector has actually got around to understanding this, the importance of this. The third is, if one looks at how the real estate sector has dealt with environmental laws or environment regulation, I will just give the example from 2006 onwards. In 2006, the Environmental Impact Assessment Notification, which is the main legal instrument that we use for assessing projects for their environmental and social impacts, it was up for an overhauling or an amendment. The real estate sector, I just want to read out some of the comments that were submitted by the real estate sector in response to these amendments. One group said, I won't mention which these groups are. One group said, real estate development is by nature non-polluting, non-hazardous and environment friendly and are subject to close monitoring, therefore they need to be exempted from environment clearances. Another one said, construction activity does not create any nuisance to the environment, therefore it is necessary to exclude housing and construction projects. Exclude, like en masse. Then another one said, such projects only, this is our favorite actually, such projects only emit human breath in the atmosphere and human solid waste which is treated. Therefore, they are different from all other industries listed in the notification. Yeah. So this was, and because of the intense activity that the real estate sector took to alter the EI notification and to keep them out of the notification, the Prime Minister's office at that time actually deregulated the entire sector from this notification. Yeah, but it's been a very unstable policy space for the sector since then, because every time it is inconvenient and some projects end up creating some trouble, they put a few of them back in the notification. And then when it becomes inconvenient to have them in the notification, they put them out. So there's been a lot of changes in the policy instrument with respect to real estate sector. A recent move by so the Ministry of Environment and Forests came up with a recent sort of a process where they suggested that projects that have been in violation of the EI notification until now can sort of accept that they have been in violation, and the government will try and do something to bring them in compliance with the law. Yeah. So in that process, within a short window period, they had a specific window period where they asked projects to self-identify that they are in violation of these projects. About 2,000 projects self-identified within that short window period. Nearly 25% of them are from this sector. That's real estate, construction, area development, various other things. And this is only the ones who have identified as violators. There may be a large, there may be many more projects that are actually not in compliance. And the reason why I'm talking about this at this point is because they all their investments, finances, if they are housing projects, all of them are at risk because of these legal problems. And a large part of these legal problems that the projects face are because of how the sector itself has made the policy unstable for itself. So I'll stop at this, and I'm happy to take questions at the end of the session.
Thank you, Manju ma'am. May I request Mr. Christopher McElwain to start with the presentation. I'll just first introduce you. Mr. Christopher McElwain, Faculty of Law, University of New South Wales. His research considers low sustainability and environmental protection can best be achieved through new approaches to regulation and regulatory theory, focusing on waste prevention, resource recovery, and saving food from becoming food waste. His approaches to research is combined with the supported by more than 20 years of experience. He was a solicitor and prosecutor from NSW Environment Protection Authority for more than 10 years. He was subsequently a senior manager in NSW EPA's Waste and Resource Recovery team for more than 10 years. So with that note, I request you to continue. Let's have a round of applause.
Thank you very much, both for being here, and also, I realise this is almost the end of the conference, for still being awake. I also apologise to you for talking to you about a subject that is not a happy one. If you know about how humans waste food, you can go to sleep for the next 1 minute. But I'm going to show you the statistics, and the numbers are at least as bad as for climate change. So wasting food is one of humanity's largest market and regulatory failures, because we humans, staggeringly on a global scale, waste 1/3 of all of the food we grow or harvest or make, and the numbers are horrifying. In 2011, the FAO said we wasted 1.3 billion metric tons, and this year Boston Consulting has said the number's gone up, probably 1.45 billion metric tons. And think of it this way, the more food we make, the more food we waste. So we need to also remember that when we're making food and then throwing it away, we're also throwing away all the energy, water, soil, land, biodiversity, chemicals, money, and work that made the food that either never got to your plate, or when it did get to your plate, you threw it away. The costs of this, both direct and indirect, are estimated to be $2.6 trillion US, and the greenhouse gas emissions from wasting food if it was one country, the third worst country in the world after the United States and China. And in a world where we're running out of fresh water, we use 250 cubic kilometres of fresh water to grow the food, or harvest the food, or make the food, and then throw it away. So, I've just had a look at some quick numbers for how much food is wasted in India and how much food is wasted in Australia. It's estimated, although they don't really know because it hasn't been properly measured, that about 67 million tonnes of food is wasted in India. This number is staggering to me. Of the wheat harvest in India, such a staple part of the Indian diet, 21 million metric tonnes of wheat rots in India or never makes it to the plate or is thrown away. That is the entire wheat harvest of Australia. All the wheat harvested in Australia is lost in India. That's estimated to cost $8.3 billion, about 40% of all the value of food in India, but I think that number must be too low. In Australia, the Australian government's estimated that food waste costs about $20 billion Australian each year. Again, that number is too low. My suspicion is the number's probably double that. We do know that households and businesses send about 5.3 million tonnes of food waste, so that's just food waste, to landfill every year, because that's pretty accurately measured. And businesses send about 2.2 million tonnes of food waste to landfill. And so you can see, even if you never cared about food or the environment, you were just running a food business, food waste is important to you because it's throwing money away. It's making your business inefficient. So it needs some attention. The numbers aren't really clear, and I apologise on this. This is from Boston Consulting, but it just shows where the food is lost in the supply chain. Starting on the left-hand side in production, it's about $230 billion US a year and 500 million US tonnes a year in production, so there's a lot lost in production. And then considerable amounts lost in handling and storage, processing and packaging, distribution and retail. You'll see it goes back up on the right-hand side, even if you can't read the numbers. The columns on the right-hand side are bigger, and that's us. That's consumers and food retail businesses and supermarkets. That's when it gets to our plate. We throw away, again, huge amounts, 340 million US tonnes a year globally, worth $500 billion US dollars a year. So you can see what's happening. We're losing a lot at the beginning of the food supply chain, and then at every step in the food supply chain, and then we are throwing it away when it gets to us. And it's the same in schools, prisons, hospitals, universities, research centres. We're all doing it. The number that we use in Australia by the Australian government is that if you go to the supermarket and you bring your recycled bags, because nobody uses single-use plastic bags anymore, and you have 5, so you buy 5 shopping bags of food at the supermarket, Australians put one of those bags of food in the bin. So it's about 20% loss. But you must be aware that the reasons why food is wasted, say in India mostly, is very different from why it's wasted in Australia. So in India, the main reasons are said to be, and this is from the Indian Institute of Management, not modern food distribution chains, not enough cold storage to keep food in good condition, and refrigerated trucks, bad transport situations, I've experienced that myself in Delhi recently, erratic electricity supply, and not good incentives provided by the government to get industry to invest. So those are the reasons why, some of the reasons why food is wasted in India. In Australia, the reasons are different. One of the big reasons is much of the food that's grown does not meet supermarket specification. In other words, the food we grow in Australia is not beautiful enough. And I'll show you a picture in a minute. This is very true. It doesn't matter if it's bananas, tomatoes, potatoes. We want to see only beautiful fruit and vegetables in our supermarkets, and if it's not pretty enough, we throw it away. There's also a lot of loss from consumers because they're confused about whether used by means the same as best before. And then in the processing of food, there's quite a lot of food that's wasted, and as I say, a lot of waste also in supermarkets and retail businesses. So just one bit of research, out of 2 farms in Queensland, 50 tonnes or 40% and 56% of the tomatoes never reached the consumer. That's half of all of the food that was grown never got on a plate. That looks like this. So this is what we're throwing away. Those tomatoes are not beautiful enough to be sold in Australia as food. That's a tragedy. So as you know, the Sustainable Development Goals, and this has been specifically targeted, food waste, in the Sustainable Development Goals. It's goal 12.3. By 2030, halve per capita global food waste, and they also talk about something that's slightly different, which is food loss, which is so losses prior to it getting to the consumer or the business. So that's the target. We've got a clear target. And also these, we saw earlier the slide showing the connection between various Sustainable Development Goals, how fixing one will fix another or help to fix another. So lowering food waste will also, of course, obviously, help to end hunger by 2030, and also, say, Sustainable Development Goal 12.4, ensure sustainable food production. So if we try and fix food waste, it'll help with other Sustainable Development Goals as well. And many countries have started to move on this, but it's still very early days. So surprisingly, Scotland was one of the countries that led the field on this in 2010, and it said it wants to stop food waste by 33% by 2025. Surprisingly, under a different administration in the United States, in 2015, the Department of Agriculture and the US EPA said they want to reduce food loss and food waste by half by the year 2030. And Australia adopted the Sustainable Development Goal of halving food waste by 2030 just last year, in November last year. So, just, as I was introduced, I'm a lawyer by trade, but I'm one of the few lawyers who does not think that law is the only solution. So you can see here I've suggested you're going to need a combination of measures to really tackle food waste. You must have a clear goal, but we already have that, so that part's done. You need strong policies, you need education, so even teaching consumers how to do the right thing with the food in their fridge or the food in the pantry. Build the right infrastructure, that's obviously true both for Australia and India. Use new technology. Almost everybody you meet is carrying a smartphone, and there are now apps that can connect people who have food to connect with people who want food. Create the proper market incentives. So the best way to encourage food not to be wasted is to make it cheaper to do so, or indeed you learn to save money by not wasting your food. Think about it yourself. Every time you throw food away, that is you throwing your own money away. And finally, make sure you have the right laws in place. Importantly, you cannot take any steps in relation to food waste unless you can measure it, and the United Nations have started setting out a protocol for that. And there's been some work done in India looking at chickpeas and mangoes and milk and rice. Australia has not properly measured how much food waste it has, and is at the very beginning of setting up a national process for that. Education, it's don't bother reinventing the wheel, because there are at least 2 quite good initiatives in the world. The UNEP one is Safe Food Initiative, really focusing on business, and then in the United Kingdom, the Waste and Resource Action Program has been running its Love Food, Hate Waste to teach households how to save its waste. That's been copied all over the world, including in Australia, and it's very targeted, and it uses online programs to let people just teach themselves about how to save their own food and so save their own money. Apart from education and using technology, we adopt a clear goal, and some countries are now starting to experiment with food-saving policies and food-saving laws. And I'll just give you one example. Scotland, which is really racing out in front on this, but there are many other countries, some actually in France in relation to supermarkets, and in Japan. Scotland said all local municipal authorities must provide a food waste collection service, and households and businesses then must separate out their food waste and provide it to the authorities for collection. That really only deals with the waste at the end of the process. So once it's really become waste, and then you're turning it into compost and energy via anaerobic digestion. But there are other steps that people need to take to prevent it becoming waste in the first place. You should also really try and encourage self-regulation. It's an area that will be ripe for self-regulation, because the large food business organisations can set their own goals and very successfully reduce their costs. And some of the biggest global businesses on earth are taking these steps. Walmart is a giant, Tesco supermarkets in the UK, and Coles supermarkets, which has about 40% of the supermarket business in Australia, are all setting goals about reducing waste. So they've publicly stated their goal, they're measuring it, and then they're reporting against it. And they're learning how to save a lot of money. It's also attracting customers. And then you can use technology, and there are simple technologies. So if you're a large-scale food business, like a chain of hotels, you put the smart scales in your kitchen, and then everything before it gets thrown in the bin must go on the scale. It gets measured, and that report goes to the head chef, and the head chef can then see, my gosh, we're spending this much money on food, and we're throwing away this much money in the bin because we've put too much food on the plate, or the wrong combination of food on the plate, or the plate's too big. So that's another trick. Just make the plate a little bit smaller and put a little bit less food on the plate. It still looks like a full plate, but it's got less food. So there are all sorts of, there are very simple techniques. I'll tell you a very simple thing that's been done in one school in Western Australia. So at lunchtime, the children are released at lunch, and they're not allowed to eat lunch for the first 45 minutes. So of course what do children do when they're released? They run around like crazy for 45 minutes. Then at the end of lunchtime, they're allowed to eat. So how much of the lunch do they eat after running around for 45 minutes? The plate is clean. Okay, so there are simple things that can be done, just changes in human behaviour, because think about this, food waste is a human behaviour. That's all it is, and it just needs to change. So, my final statement is, we cannot be sustainable in any way, whether it's a smart city or otherwise, unless we learn to stop wasting food. We have the United Nations goal. The United Nations has nominated some champions. One of them is from India, Sunil. But perhaps there's an organisation or a group of researchers or a research institute or a business association in India that could take up the challenge of being India's food-saving champion. Now it's for someone else to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions?
these three, if anyone is willing to ask.
Question for Sunil and Manju both. Is RERA playing any role, a positive role in the fields you are working?
Can you state your name, please, and affiliation?
I'm architect Deepti Vyas. I have come from central India, Madhya Pradesh. I'm a practicing architect and an urban planner.
Thank you. Thank you.
Manju, you want to take that? I think we'll have to wait for another 5 years. Because RERA is trying to do good things. You're seeing a lot of regulation, a lot of investors are very cagey, a lot of developers have become very cagey. So I think it will do good. So that's my own take on it.
As you were talking about the public hearing things, so I have seen public hearings at our places.
No, I was about to rebut Manju that in urban sector is the only sector, since we are in public eye, that a lot of hearing does take place, or a lot of objections are filed. I've seen many big projects like steel plants or power plants. Enron, you've seen this whole Sarkar movie 1, 2, 3. It's all about Enron power project. They don't see public hearings at all. The other thing that I will just say is that as an industry professional, we had a project which was 75 acres of land in Gurgaon. We went ahead with the permissions. We got permissions to build it. 7.5 million square feet, largest society in Gurgaon. And we were a compliant company. So we were saying that we will follow every single regulation that exists. We had a license to use only 40 containers of water a day. We needed 400. Now, you can have Gurgaon as a water scarce zone. It's great. But why have a master plan then? Don't issue master plans in areas where you can't develop, which are not fit for development. But as an industry body, I bought land, I bought foreign investment in the country. We are giving employment. After having done everything, now you say, sorry, we can just give you 40 containers and tankers of water. And if I violate that, and which we had to, there is no reason that I would not deliver as per RERA my project in time.
Yes.
Then there is a FIR notice that is issued. I am jailed.
Yes.
That is what happens. So, you are working in a system that makes you violate law systematically.
Right.
So it's a systemic. I am committing my project to be delivered in time. I do not have the resources to build it. So then I will say I will with impunity violate this. Let's see what happens. Another violation. So RERA is also like this, And RERA I can give you lots of examples in RERA which need to be tightened up. It is self-certification. How many professionals in this country do good certification? Self-certification is no certification.
Of course not.
So RERA has self-certification. So, you see, laws will take time in this country to develop, evolve, but I think the good part is that people are talking about it. So I have this belief that at least something good is going to come out of this. At least public awareness is going to come out of this. At least the developer is going to find it much more tougher to siphon off money. 70% is in the bank. And nobody likes money will be lying in the bank. So people will complete their projects in much more faster pace than what they were used to doing before. So I think in the long run, yes, RERA will do a good impact. The other thing is that, when you have laws, and I completely agree when, let the regulations happen, take their own time. Once they are put in black and white as laws, statutes in this country, let's not create a situation where we have rollbacks. There are rollbacks on that.
We can have just one because we are yet to start with valedictory. You can ask, it's the last one we get to.
No, I'm just surprised about you said that there are 7 colonies and people were not involved. How it happens?
Yeah, so the law, at least the environmental impact assessment law, says that public hearings, these projects got themselves exempted from the public hearing clause through that 2006 amendment. And it has been happening systematically. This is not a one-step
but that
process.
Must be a part of master plan, development.
Yeah, so the thing is, there may be certain procedures required for putting information out in public under other regulations, but the discussions under those regulations are quite different. the reason why the environmental impact assessment notifications, public hearings are important is because that's the only time where the project gets to talk about what kinds of impacts it's going to have on all these environmental parameters, whether it is, you know, water or whether it is air or, I mean, even spatially, you know. So the thing is, I mean, when most mining projects, most steel plants, most thermal power plants, actually they all go through public hearings, and that is the point at which all of these issues that have been left out of assessments come up. But in the case of these projects, and in the case of projects in Delhi, public hearings are not held.
सरकार की ज़मीन है, सरकार डेवलप कर रही है, किससे पूछने का है? At the end of the day, that's the mindset in which we work. And mining की आप बात कर रहे हो, see, mining I have seen licenses being given to people is after public hearing, after the fact that there are big reds in the public hearing, and then once the mine is allotted, then it is cancelled. This is the history of this nation.
I think we are running out of time, so we can continue the conversation. If you are going to the dinner and cocktails, we're going to be there. So if you have any other questions, then just, you know, try to find us and we'll be happy to address them. Thank you very much for attending this session, and thank the speakers as well for a very insightful presentation.
Thank you, everyone. As a token of appreciation, I would like to request Dr. Maria to kindly present a memento to our distinguished speakers. Xinyi Geng, Ms. Manju Menon, Mr. Sunil Agarwal, Mr. Christopher McElwain. These paintings showcase Goan art, which comes with belief that good image brings good luck. Goans are major tribal communities of central of India, from central of India. The artists have used natural color derived from charcoal, colored soil, plant sap, leaves, and cow dung. This mystical art form is created by putting together dots and lines. Now I request Ms. Ankita. Ms. Ankita Bokhar, Research Associate, that Energy Resources Institute, to present a memento.